Are you happy yet? Welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition, wherever and however you may be listening or watching the show, and whatever you may be doing. Are you happy yet? I'm going to talk about that today in some depth about happiness. And you're saying, wait a minute. This is a health talk show. I came to hear about my kidneys and my heart. Well, you know, it turns out that health and wellness and well-being are big concepts and implicate a lot of things about our life. And happiness is part of wellness and our well-being. And sometimes people get that. Most of the time, I think people understand that. I don't have to go into a great oration about or make a grand argument about why that's the case. Most people, I think, instinctively understand that. Then again, there are those who would say, you know, that has nothing to do with my health. I have high blood pressure. Being happy, or I have cancer. Why should I be happy? What does happiness have to do with that? Well, you know, it turns out, I think, that happiness is a thread that weaves a lot of things together for us in our life. Today, I'm going to explore this topic with Dr. Ellen Kenner. We have her scheduled to come on, what, at 9:30? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. A couple of weeks back, I don't know what I was talking about, but I got on to, I need to devote more attention to our psychological health on this show. And I made a promise that I'm going to do that. And then our syndicator was listening to the show. He listens all the time. He's probably listening today. Joe Sparrow. Good guy. Called me, and I chatted with him. I called him back. And he said, you know, I know somebody that would be a great guest. He told me about Dr. Kenner. And so we're going to have her on today. She's a clinical psychologist, graduated from the University of Rhode Island with her PhD. Relationship expert, happiness expert. I'm curious. I really am excited about talking with her. This is a wonderful topic. There has been so much written about this. You can approach this from any number of perspectives. You can approach it from a medical perspective. You can approach it from a philosophical, religious, political perspective. It is why? Because it turns out that happiness is one of those elements of our being that is integral, in my opinion, to not only to our health, but maybe to what we are and what we become. You know, our being in the world. The phenomenologists talk about a person's being in the world, their place in the world, as they move through time and space, day by day, right, moment by moment, existentially, experience, and having these moments of experience that are defining, that shape you, and that relationship is interesting. You influence events, and events influence you. You know, I know that people like to bash B.F. Skinner. You know, he was a hardcore behaviorist and thought that we were totally determined by our environment and that free will was an illusion. You know, he says, yeah, you make choices, but those choices are conditioned upon things that have happened to you. Well, he wasn't all wrong, but he wasn't all right either. That's my opinion. It's probably somewhere betwixt and between free will and totally determined. In and the happiness gets implicated in those kind of conversations too. It's just astonishing. It appears in legal documents. It appears in our government. In pursuit of happiness. In the pursuit of happiness. And there are any number of experts that, beginning all the way back over 2,000 years ago in philosophy, the Stoics, for example, Stoicism, it was a movement of the Hellenistic period. They were very much interested in happiness. You have all these philosophers writing about it. Gary, we coming on air, he said, Doc, Aristotle was interested in happiness. Well, yeah, they were. It's interesting. It has occupied the imagination of people. I think there's something, it's innate. It's innate.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a personal question. Have you ever been in a relationship where you're just miserable, and then been in one where you were so happy you couldn't even think straight, where somebody had to just grab you and go, what are you doing? What are you thinking?
Yeah, and I've never gone into, maybe this will come up in a conversation with Dr. Kenner. I've never gone into a relationship and it got miserable and I stayed, no. Mm-mm. Or, we can get blissful. You become blissful, and a lot of that's hormonal. There's a lot of chemical reaction going on. I hate to take the romance out of it, but you're pumping out different kinds of hormones when you're miserable and when you're not, and when you're happy.
Right.
So there's a biochemical thing attached to this too. Answer to your question is yes and yes and no and no. Yeah, and people use relationships, Gary, as a vehicle to drive them to happiness, using that metaphor, thinking that it's going to get you there. If you fuel up the vehicle and get it all ready, prepared and whatnot, and you got the right passenger in the vehicle with you, you can drive yourself to happiness. I'm not so sure about that.
I've had friends like that have been in just miserable relationships and they keep on, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. And you've told me it's never, if it's bad, it's going to get worse.
Usually bad things get worse and good things get better. Usually. Not all the time. Usually. Bad things usually get worse and good things typically get better. And sometimes, it'll be interesting to see what Dr. Kenner has to say about all of this and how happiness is woven into the relational dimension of people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And what does happiness mean? What's the meaning of happiness? Well, it's going to depend on, I guess, the perspective from which you start, your life experience, and so on. Dan Gilbert is somebody who is a recognized figure in this arena. What's the title of that book? Stumbling on Happiness? Is that the title of it? I may have that title wrong. Stumbling and Happiness, and I'll have to check. But he has an interesting point of view about happiness. I'm sure Dr. Kenner knows who he is. And he thinks that most of the time, most people are approaching this the wrong way. He's probably right about that. Come on back and let's see if we can make you happy. Welcome back and welcome to this happy edition, happiness edition of Let's Talk Nutrition. This topic, I know to some may seem a bit touchy-feely and thinking, oh, this is not rigor. It's not rigorous. There's no science here. Oh, au contraire. Lots of science. Dan Gilbert, I was right about his book, Stumbling on Happiness. He is both a great storyteller, has a wonderful sense of humor. You can catch some of his talks if you go to TED Talk. You'll see some of his talks. He has a very grounded kind of way of connecting with the audience rhetorically. He's a good rhetorician, and not elegant, but very effective. He knows how to make the point, cuts through and gets to it. So he's worth watching and listening to. And in his book, Stumbling on Happiness, he makes, and I'll bring this up with Dr. Kenner, she'll be on here in a bit. He believes that in the ardent, lifelong pursuit of happiness that most people engage in, he thinks that most people have the wrong map. They're using the wrong directions to get to where they want to go. He thinks that happiness is like an optical illusion for people, because he thinks that the brain, in some sort of systematic way, misjudges for us, as if we were separated from our brain, what makes us happy. And he makes a big deal about the frontal lobe, that part of as we evolved to develop that frontal lobe, that cerebral cortex, which really distinguishes us from all other species of animal. We're self-reflexive. We can think about our thinking. We can imagine, we can project. That works for you. I think he's trying to say it works against you. And when you're trying to figure out, well, what makes me happy? You're trying to figure that out, and you're making certain assumptions about that. And he argues that the brain tricks you, and you end up making wrong assumptions about what makes you happy. So in one of his talks, he has these two photographs side by side. One photograph is this guy or somebody winning the lottery, $300 and some million. And the other photograph right next to it is somebody in a wheelchair who's a paraplegic. And he said, which one of those do you think which one of those two people do you think is happy? Well, people are going to say the lottery winner. Turns out that in his research, he discovered that lottery winners and those who become paraplegic 1 year later are both equal in terms of how happy they are and how happy they are about their lives. Imagine that now. The assumption was, well, if you have all that money, why, you can go where you want, do what you want, be with whom you want. How could you not be happy? Compared to what? The individual who's a paraplegic in a wheelchair having to depend on others. How could that person possibly be happy? We assume that. He said, the brain causes us to do that. Interesting argument, isn't it?
It is. I mean, everybody's happy for a different reason.
Maybe a lot of people are happy for the same reasons, because maybe it could be too, Gary, that many people are making the same wrong assumptions. Okay? Is a Buddhist monk happier than a cab driver in New York, or my dad when he was alive, who worked on for the railroad, worked on platforms with trucks and trains and pollution? Was the Buddhist monk happier than my dad? Know about that.
Hmm.
What I saw in my father was a Polish immigrant who loved his family and found great pleasure in going to work, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, going to work and doing his job, taking care of us. That made him happy. I know that. I know that. And he was devoted to that. So, I don't know. Is the upper one half of 1% of people who have all the money in the world, are they happier than everybody else? I don't know about that. So, I don't know, Gary. Gilbert makes it's an interesting point. I can't wait to talk to Dr. Kenner. I want to see what she says. And she wrote one of her papers called Virtue and Happiness. It turns out that the Stoics, that philosophical outfit from thousands of years ago, a couple thousand years ago, believed that virtue was the vehicle, if you will, to happiness. Virtue, leading a virtuous life, and how they defined it. So she wrote a paper called, and I was trying to get my mitts on that paper, and I couldn't get it, couldn't find it. I wanted to see what she said about virtue. Being virtuous. If you talk to somebody who suffered or is suffering from a life-threatening disease, Gary, or if you talk to a soldier who has been in battle and has seen horrible things, and whose light and who is at a breath away from dying, talk to that person about happiness compared to somebody who didn't have those kind of experiences. I think you'll have two different responses to the question as to what it is.
Don't be stressed out or anxious.
Welcome back. Welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition, wherever and however you may be listening or watching the show, and whatever you may be doing. As I promised several weeks ago, whenever I said I was going to introduce into the show, synthesize into the show, more conversation about our psycho-emotional health, our psychological life, that aspect of wellness and well-being that to some is a bit touchy-feely, not to me. The science of happiness, for example, is robust. Martin Seligman and others have done a lot of research in this arena. Positive psychology, that aspect, that subcategory of psychology has made its way and has legitimated itself more than needs to be done. So it's real. So there is this science of relationships, the science of happiness. I mean, I come out of the social sciences, trained as a social and behavioral scientist, but find myself in the world of chemists and biologists, and my training also includes that. And so it's a mix of things, right? And you're trying to, in the show, you do this day in and day out, year in and year out, over 14 years, and you have your biases get in your own way. And I realized, I said, you're not talking enough about what's going on in their head, if I can put it just, bottom line. And I promised I would do better at that. And I'm keeping my promise. And today, as I told you, I've been telling you for the last couple of weeks since or a week or so, 10 days since we were able to get her booked onto the show, that Dr. Kenner would be on. I'm excited about having her on. There's so much I can tell you about Dr. Kenner. She's a practicing clinical licensed psychologist. She got her PhD, I think, from the University of Rhode Island, if my memory serves me correctly, and has a radio show, her own radio show. I'll get you to get her to tell you about that. It's called The Rational Basis of Happiness. I don't want to pigeonhole her or distill her down to some couple of things in which she's expert, but she seems to be an expert in relationships, romantic relationships, happiness. But I'm sure she's much more than that, and there's a lot more I can tell you about her, but that will unfold as we talk. I just want to get her on. Dr. Kenner, thanks for coming on to Let's Talk Nutrition. So grateful that you agreed to come on and spend some time with us. It's a privilege and a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you.
How are you doing today?
Oh, very good. I woke up cheerful, so it was a great start. And I spoke with my daughter this morning, which is always great.
Yeah. You spoke with your daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is she a psychologist too?
She went into cognitive neuroscience and into research.
Mm-hmm.
So I veered off into the therapy end, and she went into research, but she just had twins. So
oh, well, congratulations.
Currently not working, yes.
Well, congratulations. That's great. Good for you.
Yeah, my husband corrected me. She is working with twins and a 3-year-old.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Do you still live up in the Northeast, or are you somewhere? One of my producers said she lives here in Florida somewhere. Is that true?
Yes, we are in Sanibel right now. We live part-time in Rhode Island, but as much as we can down here. We're residents of Florida now, and we love it.
Yeah, it's easier living.
Oh man, I love it. I don't have to shovel.
I tell people, I said, I grew up in Pittsburgh, as if you couldn't tell from my accent, but I said it's so hard to live there, man. The winter, it takes a lot of effort. You got to pile on a bunch of clothes. You got to get the car prepared. You got to do this. You got to do that. Right? It's crazy.
Right.
Well,
some people love that. My son said he wants to move to New Hampshire, not Florida.
Good luck.
He loves the skiing.
Oh well, yeah. God bless him.
Yeah.
This is good that you're on. This topic is so resonant and so important. Happiness. And I also want to talk and work in, I'm sure we'll weave these two themes together, relationships and happiness. I was saying, trying to sort of set things up for you, I said, oftentimes people use relationships as the vehicle, using this metaphor, the vehicle to drive them to happiness. The problem is they have the wrong directions, the wrong map,
Yeah.
making all kind of wrong assumptions, and they got the wrong person sitting next to them in the car.
Yes, yes, that's a very good analogy.
You like that?
Yes.
Let me ask you, let me just get to this.
Yes.
What makes you happy?
Pursuing things that I have chosen and I love. Feeling liberated to choose my own values, not what my parents wanted for me. I'd be working in business right now. But having the courage and having the confidence to focus, to ask myself the questions, what is it I seriously want in life? What do I want in 4 main areas of life? You named one of them, romance.
Mm.
Another one is career. If you're in a career you're unhappy with, how can you segue out of it into one that you love? Another one is friends. You know, sometimes people have friends that they hang on to for life, and they're not really friends. They don't like them. They dread when they call, versus the ones that they beam when they get a phone call from them. And the other one is hobbies and interests. You know, what kind of... I used to bowl as a child, and I hated it, but that's what everyone in my neighborhood did. And to this day, if you say bowling, it's like, don't make me do that. But if you say dancing, ballroom dancing, I love ballroom dancing. So when you populate your life with activities, values that you have chosen and you love, and that are not harmful. I mean, you don't want to be gambling every day or drinking or drugging, you know, but things that are within the range of healthy, you wake up in the morning and you can't wait to get your day started.
I see. So I was looking at your profile and your sort of summary of your career, what I could find, and I saw you wrote a number of articles, and of course your book, you co-authored Selfish Path to Romance.
Right, with Dr. Ed Locke.
Yes. And I saw one of your papers, and I got intrigued real quick, and I was trying to find it. I couldn't get my mitts on it. It was the one entitled Virtue and Happiness. The minute I saw that, I thought of the Stoics.
Oh, yeah, that would be awful, wouldn't it?
And because they talked about a virtuous life, virtue. They connected virtue and happiness together, and I saw you had virtue and happiness. When we come back, I want to ask you what you mean by that. What's the connection, and how does being virtuous or a virtuous life connect with those 4 aspects, you know, romance, career, friends, and the things that are of interest and hobbies to you? If you could pull that together, I want to see how you put that together for us, and maybe we can make some sense of that. And we're trying to find our map and find our way to happiness with Dr. Ellen Kenner.
Feel tired, lethargic?
welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition, wherever and however you may be listening or watching the show, coast to coast and globally, and whatever you may be doing. Dr. Ellen Kenner is our guest today, and we're exploring the theme of happiness. You would think, oh, boy, that's easy. Easy to define. What's so hard about that? Well, there may be as many definitions as there are people. And the science of happiness is helpful, but there's a bit of conceptual confusion there too. But that's all right. Dr. Kenner is a licensed clinical psychologist, and she has her own radio show, and we'll get her to talk about that, the rational basis of happiness. And her career is she's had a remarkable career. She's done a lot of different things, and that we can talk about that too along the way. Dr. Kenner, welcome back. So your paper, Virtue and Happiness, I'm just curious, what's the connection for you there?
Well, what do most people think about when they think about, I've got to be virtuous? I mean, what comes to mind?
For me, to be virtuous, to do the right thing, even when nobody's looking, to achieve and to do good for others, and to leave the world a better place than when you leave this earth than when you got here.
You're wanting good relationships. You're wanting to be
Sure.
helpful. You're wanting to leave your mark on the world. That's a nice mark that you can feel proud of yourself internally, even if nobody's watching. You don't need to lie and cheat and steal, right? And covet your neighbor's wife. So most people think of virtue as things they can't do, as prohibitions. Thou shalt not. I mean, think of the Bible. Thou shalt not, X, Y, Z. It's on and on. And instead, all of us have a motor, which is our mind. I mean, you used the analogy of the car earlier, but we have our mind, which directs each one of us individually and uniquely through life. And it does not come with an instruction manual.
Mm-mm.
We need to program it. And most of us are clueless. We don't know how to make choices. That's what we need to do to guide ourselves to have a happy life. We need to be able to make choices and have confidence in the choices we make. That doesn't mean we're always right. We can make mistakes, and we need to know how to deal with those mistakes. But because it's unavoidable that you make countless choices every day, what am I going to wear today? Who am I going to call today? What is my top priority for the day? Will I exercise today or not? We make countless choices, and those choices add up to either a happy life or a mediocre life or a very sad life or an evil life, if you want it, the other end of the continuum. So when you talk about virtue, virtues are guides to help us move through life comfortably and confidently. And so what would be a virtue? You named one of them, honesty. You didn't say it as honesty, but making good choices, being honest, being true to the facts of reality, even if nobody's watching, even if you can, in quotes, get away with it. Because you never get away with it. Who knows that you lied, cheated, or stole? If nobody else knows about it, who knows about it?
Mm-hmm. My producer wants to.
Dr. Kenner, before you came on, me and Dr. Garko had a discussion about. I used to be a police officer, and one time there was a gentleman that was killing himself, and I cut him down and gave him CPR and brought him back, and to find out that he was a child molester.
Ooh.
And I had years of problems dealing with that. Did I do a good thing for a bad person, or did I just do the right thing because it was the right thing to do?
Well, you did the right thing in your context of knowledge, so you should never have unearned guilt, because that could have been the victim of a child molester. You did not know it at the time.
Yeah, when Gary asked Dr. Kenner, when Gary asked me that, he said, "Doc, what do you think about that?" I said, "You did the right thing."
You did the right thing, and consequently, I hope that he is imprisoned or better, that he's not around anymore.
Yeah, he's the latter. He's not around anymore.
Okay.
When I was listening to you talk now, in many ways you sounded a lot like Dan Gilbert. I know you know who that is.
I don't know who that is, but go ahead.
All right. He's a Harvard psychologist. He has a point of view about happiness. He thinks that the brain sometimes tricks us into making wrong choices about, or thinking and making wrong assumptions about happiness. You know, the frontal lobe, the cerebral cortex. It's been a blessing and a curse. And he has an interesting point of view. If you watch some of his presentations on TED Talk, he's very entertaining, very sensible guy. And he tells the story, and see what you make of this, where you have lottery winners. They did some studies. They took lottery winners, and then they took people who were paraplegics, and then 1 year later evaluated them to see.
Yes, I have heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah, and evaluated them to see where they were on a happiness scale. I don't know what metrics they used or psychometrics they used, but he found out that they were equally happy.
Well,
What do you make of that? What do you make of that?
I don't think of lottery winners. See, I only mentioned one of the virtues. You asked me about virtues. Your core virtue is to connect your mind with the road, if you use your analogy of driving, to connect your mind to drive yourself each day down a happy path, a path that is filled with things you love. And so rationality, using your mind well, learning those skills, having the instruction manual of how to think clearly is wonderful, which is what cognitive therapy helps with.
Yeah.
Honesty is, I'm just going to name some virtues, and I'll come back to the lottery winners and the paraplegics question. Honesty is another virtue. If you cheat and lie, you know you cheated and lied.
Yeah.
And you don't value yourself. You're not building self-esteem. Integrity, saying what you mean and meaning what you say and following through on it. You know, I'm going to exercise, and then you go to the gym. You follow through on it. That's a simple example. Thinking for yourself is another one. Rather than bending to peer pressure or doing what your parents want, it's having the courage to have your own thoughts, to own them, and to guide. Hopefully, they're rational, and to give yourself good guidance.
All right. Well, we're coming out of this block, and we're going to get to the top of the hour. We'll come back. We have another hour. We're going to spend it with Dr. Ellen Kenner. This is great. It's wonderful. Been looking forward to this. This has been my treat. This is a treat for me. Really is. I enjoy talking with her and exploring this very important topic. It knits people together, and ironically, too, it can separate people. We'll talk. welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition, wherever and however you may be listening or watching the show, and whatever you may be doing coast to coast and globally. I say globally because we stream this show live up on the 4 platforms every day, and as we speak, on average, there's about 30,000 hits, people around the world watching this show, and then, of course, terrestrial radio. We're in 60 markets, so we're connected, and I love the contact with you, and I love it when you call the show. Today's a perfect day to call as well because Dr. Ellen Kenner is on the show. You can see she's kind. This is a safe zone. The show's always been a safe zone for people. I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about religion. I don't talk about those things that divide people. So you can come onto the show and express yourself and not worry about being criticized or, deconstructed, as they say. It is a safe zone. And today's a special day. Want to talk about our mental health, our mental wealth, if you will. That's important. That's an important part of wellness and well-being, and connected to health. Those dimensions: health, wellness, and well-being. Happiness is a construct. It's an idea that maybe weaves all of those together. It's one of the things that can weave them all together. And then we were coming out of that last block, and I said, in an ironic way, happiness can unite people, but it can also divide them. There's so many paradoxes in life. We could explore that. There's many things we can explore, but here's how to connect and make contact with the show.
877-897-8255. That's 877-897-TALK. Dr. Garko's personal email is drgarko@letstalknutrition.com. Follow us, like us, and share us on Facebook at Let's Talk Nutrition, on the Instagram at Let's Talk Nutrition, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where we have over 62,000 views now, 1,100 videos at Let's Talk Nutrition on YouTube.
Dr. Kenner is a licensed clinical psychologist and has spent her career helping others, which is a wonderful thing to do. I'm sure that it has brought her considerable happiness. And wonderful credentials, well-trained, thoughtful, has her own health talk show called The Rational Basis of Happiness. I'll ask her to talk about that a little bit. I was looking around trying to understand better who she is. I've never met Dr. Kenner before. This is my first experience with her. And I found this one quote. She said that, talking about happiness, and she said, happiness is not the result of chance, wishes, hopes, dreams, prayers, drugs, relaxing, the stars, or wealth. It does not come from having a great childhood, being the hit of the party, or the most powerful politician or ruler on earth. Happiness is an emotion, she says, and emotions have understandable, rational causes. Your emotions are the result of the way you use your mind. Your happiness is under your control, close quote. That's an interesting quote. I'll ask her to respond to that. And I was, in that first hour, we were talking with Dr. Kenner about the connection between being virtuous and being happy. And I was reminded, I was telling Gary while we were waiting to come back, I said, when I was a boy, I went to Catholic school, and we were taught about the 7 deadly sins and the 7 virtues. The 7 virtues were a counter to each of the sins. You had lust versus chastity, gluttony versus temperance, greed versus charity, sloth versus diligence, wrath versus forgiveness, envy versus kindness, and pride versus humility. And the assumption is that if you practice those virtues, you will achieve a better place in heaven and all that. I get that. I understand that. But I think more existentially, I think those virtues, for some anyway, is a way to find happiness on this earth. Being temperate, being gracious with others, being forgiving of yourself and others for that matter, being kind to others, practicing humility. Those are the things that I was taught as a boy, and they stuck. Not to say that I've been all that good in practicing them. The nuns would write on my papers, "room for improvement." I dig that. I like that. And there's always room for improvement. And then Gary asked me, he said, what makes you happy? And I said, achievement, in a word, achievement, the process of achievement, not necessarily, getting to the goal. That this is a little bit of self-disclosure. In the middle of taking this very difficult course, and I had to take the exam, and it's heavily monitored and whatnot. And I took the exam, and you're on camera, and I was at home, and I scored well. I got a 90 on the exam, and my most instant response was a grown man jumped up and threw my arms in the air and said, yes, yes. And I did 3 laps. I have a big house. I did 3 laps around the island in my kitchen, home all by myself, yelling, yes, yes. It was a happy moment. It was the achievement. It was, doing well. That was a wonderful moment. And it makes me smile even now. So it doesn't take much. Maybe that's more than you wanted to know. But what I'm trying to get at is, what makes you happy? And Dr. Kenner's talking about that with us. Dr. Kenner, welcome back. It's so great to have you on.
Oh, thank you.
Could you respond to that quote I gave? It's interesting that you say that your happiness is under your control. You were suggesting that by the choices that people make. Is that what you're suggesting?
Right. You're making good choices. You picked a productive career that you love. Both those matter. And when you took that test, you felt so accomplished. You knew that it was a product of your choice-making, of your mind, of your ambition, and of your moral ambition. I mean, even to study for that test, to make it important in your life. And that's very different from going back to the lottery winner. A lottery winner just gives somebody $1, and if they win big, it makes them very uncomfortable because they know they didn't earn it. They know that the action that they took was just to give $1. So they live with a lot of guilt that what they can buy with their money is not the equivalent of what you can buy with your money, because yours has the foundation of your productivity, which is another virtue. And happiness is the achievement of rational values, healthy values. And we talked about the different area: friends and family, career, romance, and interests and hobbies.
Yeah. On your radio show, I'm sure you have people calling in talking about their relationships, and I suspect that happiness is an overarching theme in those conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
It's the foundation.
What do you what from your experience, what are the things that seem to disturb or throw people out of balance and make them unhappy in their relationships? What are those things that really bubble up to the top?
Well, I would say the biggest one that I heard over and over again in relationships was with couples. Let's use that as an example, romantic relationships. Was one or both partners would tell me in couples therapy, I feel invisible in this relationship. I don't feel heard. I don't feel valued. Or I just feel like there's no me there anymore. They lose themselves. I've lost myself in this relationship. And so my co-author, Dr. Ed Locke, who is actually world-renowned for goal setting, setting goals, we brazenly titled our book, The Selfish Path to Romance. And by that, we don't mean the narcissistic my way or the highway way to romance, but we mean exactly that you never, never betray yourself in a romantic partnership. You never lose your own mind. You never live in the shadow of another person, and that goes for both partners.
We'll come back. We'll continue with Dr. Kenner. Welcome back. Welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition. Dr. Ellen Kenner is our guest today. Dr. Kenner is a clinical psychologist. We're talking about happiness and how it's connected to our lives generally, and perhaps health, wellness, and well-being. The motive or the inspiration to talk about this is that sometimes we can get so clinical. We can talk about the biology, the physiology, the chemistry, the anatomy of health, and all of that. But there's another part of health and wellness and well-being, and that's the part that's in our mind, our psychological life. And I was saying the other day that mental pain is just as pronounced and can be just as debilitating as any physical pain a person can experience. And I needed to do a better job on the show in talking about what goes on with people and their emotions and in their mind and in their psychological life, and the struggles that they have to try and deal with day in and day out. That affects the body, and the body affects the mind. Of course, that's been around several thousand years, that idea, nothing new. And so I said, well, let's see what we can do to get this conversation going a bit. And Dr. Kenner, that's what brings Dr. Kenner here to the show. Dr. Kenner, welcome back. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, I know you've been on the radio a long time. You have your own health talk show, The Rational Basis of Happiness. Tell us about that a little bit.
It's a call-in talk show, and like you, I do interviews too, and talk about all sorts of topics in psychology, because people in therapy, people can walk into my office and have a range of problems, from family problems, problems with your kids, or romantic problems, or problems at work, or PTSD, or many different problems. So it covers a range.
How can people get in touch with your show?
They can go to drkenner.com. That would probably be the best way. In the book that we wrote, you could go to Amazon or selfishromance.com. Again, the word selfish is such a difficult word, because we mean self-valuing, self-esteem, and that's something you need to earn. But that is available on Amazon.com too, and the first chapter's free, so people can check it out.
Mm-hmm. Good. This is good. Sometimes people don't realize you have the expert, such as yourself, the therapist, but you're a human being too, right? First and foremost. And you struggle with the same issues that many of your clients and patients struggle with, I am sure.
I love therapy, and I love being a therapist, because I learn every day and I grow. And for example, learning about parenting, I would never have been the parent I was. I loved parenting. My husband did too. Had I not gone into this field and learned the skills, number one, and learned how to apply them and to have the practice. So I'm the first person that benefits from the therapy that I give, and I love that.
For sure.
And I learned the skills, like you talked about emotions, and most people, they experience their emotions, but they don't know what to do with them. They feel helpless with helplessness. They feel, when they're angry, they feel like, what do I do with this emotion? Or they're anxious or sad or happy. People usually don't worry. What do I do with this emotion, with that? But every emotion can be decoded. You can understand the underlying causes of each emotion. And I can talk a little bit about that if you want.
Sure. That's what you were reading. You were reading my mind, because I wanted to ask you, sort of like a nuts and bolts of it all. How do you tell people to make those better choices within the context of emotional circumstances, whatever the emotion or constellation of emotions may be? How do you get them there?
Well, that's a good point, because you can have multiple emotions at once, and often, most of the time, do. So if you need to know that each emotion has a theme, if you want to think of it that way. When I'm angry, I know that anger means that something is not fair. So I ask myself, what is not fair? What am I experiencing as unfair with my partner or my kids? Or if I'm in the grocery store and someone was not, maybe someone took my parking space. I was just about to pull in and they swerved and pulled in. It's not fair. So it's up to me to figure out what's not fair. And then if it's reality-based, let's say someone took my parking space and they had every right to it. It's just that I wanted it. Then I have the problem, not them, and I need to be honest with myself. So, I mean, that's a small example.
No, that's good.
You need to decode anger. You need to decode sadness. When I'm sad, I ask myself, where is my loss? If it's really sad, where is my big loss? What is something I valued? I wanted that job. I wanted to get into that school. I love that person, and he doesn't feel the same way about me. What is or I lost a loved one.
Right.
What is the huge value or value, if it's a small one, what is the value at stake? And then I can deal with that issue. If it's that I lost someone that doesn't love me and I love them dearly, I have to process that. It's okay. I can't force that person to love me, but I can, and that person would not be a good partner for me because they don't love me. They don't cherish me. I need to find someone who values me, and then I can move on.
We're headed into some hard messages here. We'll have to take them because they'll just cut me off. When we come back, if you could address the emotion of fear, I think that these emotions are universal. I don't care what part of the planet you're on, what culture you're from. Humans experience these. Fear is predominant for sure. And welcome back to, and welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition. Dr. Ellen Kenner is our guest today, talking about generally the overarching theme here is happiness. And, you know, what does that mean? How do we, on a day-to-day basis, how is that integrated into our lives? How should we think about it? Perhaps, how to approach it? How can we achieve it? What does it mean? And all of those kinds of questions. Very difficult. Seemingly easy to answer, but maybe not so much. And Dr. Kenner was talking about emotions as they are connected to happiness. That's a very good connection. And from what I understand, what she said is you sort of have to decode these emotions that we have. And she talked about, for example, anger, which is, you decode it. It's about what's unfair. You know, what's the unfairness here? Why are you angry? Because you maybe have a sense of unfairness. And then she talked about sadness. You decode that by, perhaps asking, what's my loss? What of value have I lost here? Then I mentioned, we were heading out of that last block, the emotion of fear, which all these emotions are universal. I suspect there's no human has ever lived and breathed and not experienced these emotions. Dr. Kenner, welcome back. How do you decode fear?
Well, fear is, think of examples. You have a tiger coming at you or a rabid dog. It's a response to an imminent threat. So it's asking yourself, usually it's a physical threat, but it can be a psychological threat too. And it's your gut response, your immediate response, your rapid lightning-like evaluation of a situation that is a threat to you, physically or, as I said, psychologically. So you ask yourself, you can ask, usually you're in the moment there, but what am I fearful of? What is going on? And then you can figure out what to do about it if you have the time. Anxiety is a little different. Anxiety is you're feeling uncertainty. Like after 9/11, people were afraid to get on airplanes again. Why? It could blow up. There could be a terrorist on board. So it's the uncertainty. My life is at stake. Do I get on that plane or not? Or it could be public speaking. I'm uncertain. I'm afraid to get up in front of the public. Mm-hmm. Or it could be some self-doubt. I don't know that I can manage this situation. I'm going on a date and I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, or I'm starting school.
So you're suggesting that the person have that self-conversation and ask themselves.
Yes. That's what introspection is about. Mm. You ask yourself, you can write on paper, just what am I feeling and why? And what can I do about it? What are my options? And you do it lovingly. You don't say, like a parent, okay, what are you feeling now? It's more like, what am I feeling now? It's really strong, and it may be a few of these emotions.
What about, on the more optimistic side of emotional life, what about hope? How do you decode that?
Oh, hope is there's something that you desire. It could be a job or a romantic partner, or for me it's learning. I'm hopeful that I can learn how to do bolero, the dance bolero or tango really well with my husband. And so hope is the appraisal, that your desired value will be achieved, that it's within your capacity to achieve it. And so it's your hope for achieving your own values in your life.
Do the emotions, they can work for us and work against us, obviously. And is it the emotions that sort of get in the way sometimes of, it could be both positive and negative emotions, that get in the way or lead us to make wrong choices or wrong assumptions?
Yeah, people will say, I married this person, I went by my gut, or I went by intuition, or I went by my wishes, or I went by my prayers. And all of those are different ways of saying I went by my emotions, rather unanalyzed emotions. I acted quickly, I didn't take the time to ask myself where these emotions are coming from. Why am I attracted to my husband? What is it about him that I love in contrast to guys I dated that I didn't love? people don't stop to introspect as much as they could to make their life happier. And having, as you phrased it so nicely, those conversations with yourself, it gives you remarkable control over your life.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to step on you. I apologize.
Now, there are some things that are out of your control, that tragedies or whatnot, but car accidents. But there are so many things that are within our control that we don't know how to take the reins. And that's why I love therapy, because I could teach people how to love their own minds, how to cherish their own minds, to make good choices, to think longer range, to integrate all of their different things that they love, their values in life. Again, we talked about hobbies, friendships, family that you love. If you don't love some family members, you're not obligated to do that. And that's a really important distinction.
Sure, of course.
And just populating your days with things that you enjoy without ever taking advantage of anyone else.
Okay, so I often quote this one passage by Bertrand Russell, and the quote is, "I would rather be mad with the truth than sane with lies." Close quote. I would rather be mad with the truth than sane with lies. And what I'm getting at is this. The way you're describing it, for people to engage in that introspection, self-reflection, sometimes requires being mad with, looking at the truth of things, which can make a person very uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I can't believe I let myself down here. I said I wanted to exercise and I didn't, or I lied to this person and I know it.
Mm-hmm. How do you counsel the patient or the client in dealing with truth?
Well, you can't get around facts. Facts are facts. That's the bottom line.
Facts are facts.
And what they can do about it is it can be very encouraging, because if you lied, how do you not lie? How do you not have anger management problems? What are solutions to this? And you can feel that pride that you felt when you jumped up and down and did 3 laps around the room when you did well on a test. Or I did the same when I got an interview at the university I wanted to attend. You can feel pride in yourself for improving yourself, for correcting an error that was really messing you up. Or it may not be an error. It may be that you were consciously, deliberately lying. But
Yeah.
fix that.
Having bad judgment, making a bad choice. We all are susceptible to that. You're listening to Dr. Ellen Kenner. She is the co-author of the book, The Selfish Path to Romance, with Dr. Edwin Locke, who is notable and famous, goal-setting theory. I'm familiar with Dr. Locke's work. And, of course, you can listen to Dr. Kenner on her own show, The Rational Basis of Happiness. Go to drkenner.com. We come back. We have one more block left with Dr. Kenner. We'll be right back. Here's the LTN health question of the day. Very easy. In my conversation with Dr. Kenner, trying to get her perspective on happiness and matters related. Is this statement true or false? Does Dr. Kenner believes that happiness is under your control? Is that true or false? Does Dr. Kenner believes that happiness is under your control? True or false? Here's how to call and be a winner.
877-897-8255. That's 877-897-TALK.
Dr. Kenner, welcome back. So I got to ask you, people make all kinds of assumptions about experts and, and you spent your life helping others. But as I said, you're a human being too. And I was just curious, it's interesting for the layperson to understand that a therapist can struggle in life too, yes?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I learned all the skills. What the wonderful thing is that there are so many wonderful skills to learn. Like my daughter, as I mentioned, just had twins. Well, she's learning now more parenting skills. She and her husband are very good parents, but they need additional skills of how to introduce twins to a 3-year-old, their other child. And they really are searching for new skills. They just don't go by their gut because they don't have the guidance in their minds to deal with complicated emotional situations that go on with a 3-year-old.
For sure.
And so within reason, when you say happiness is within your own control, within reason, if you're in a concentration camp, it's really, really hard. Or if you're at war, there are some things that can happen to you that are totally outside your control. But within what's possible, you can use your mind better. Learn skills, learn how to introspect, learn to be honest with yourself, and learn to embrace your values. That's the hardest one. I would ask couples in therapy or individuals in therapy, what do you love in life? What do you want to pursue? What did you dream of becoming? Who were your heroes or heroines? And they would say, I never let myself think about that. I have to live for others. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they become very resentful in life. I do for everybody else and nothing for myself. Well, what would you like to do? They say, well, I don't let myself think about that. So you want people, you want your friends to pursue their values, you want to pursue your values, and everyone has unique values, and then you mesh friendships together, and you mesh good relationships together, but you need to be able to cherish yourself first.
Let's go to Jenkintown, that's near Philadelphia, and Michael lives there. Michael, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on, Michael.
Hello, Dr. Greg.
Hi, Michael. How are you? How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for asking.
Good. So
Good,
here's.
I expected better.
Well, good. Here's the question: Does Dr. Kenner believes that happiness is under your control? Is that true or false?
It's true.
It's true. She does believe that, and she just qualified that by saying, up to a certain point, there's some things that are not within one's span of influence, but. Congratulations. I just wanted to ask you, how are you doing with your health? How are you coming along?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. I find myself saying that all the time.
Yeah, I expect it soon to be everything be over.
Well, I wish you the best. You're in my thoughts, and
thank you so much. Thank you for everything.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
There was this question today that's about. That answer is true.
The answer is true.
Lying is not good, but sometimes if lie in your brain, that's okay.
Yeah, you figure it out, right? You find a way, and I get that, and I know you're trying to find your way through this very difficult time, and I appreciate you, and you're in my thoughts, and congratulations on winning the gift card today. It's just a small token of our appreciation for your listenership. Dr. Kenner, I mentioned to Michael finding your way. My mother, it's one of the lessons of my mother. I watched my mother my whole life. I had the wonderful opportunity to watch a human being always finding a way. No matter how difficult the situation, she always found a way. And I watched that. I mean, day in and day out.
Yeah.
That was such a, that made me, gives me a sense of hope, because I knew that there was always a way. She always would find a way. She could do so much with so little. Seeing that it brings happiness, because you know that it's possible. The possible is possible. That's
right.
what. Yeah.
Right. She's resourceful, and she gives you a sense of. It helps build your sense of life with that I can do it spirit. I can achieve the good things in life, and your view of the world really matters. It's one of your core premises. One of your core premises is about yourself. Am I capable and worthy of enjoying my life? Another one, hopefully you say yes and build the skills. Another is of others. Some people are fearful of others. Some people hate others. You want a premise that says I'll judge people individually, and I'm looking for good people so I can have good friendships and good relationships and companionship. And the other one is about the world and your future. And if you have a view that there's nothing I can do, what's the use, why bother, who cares, or you're very passive, that's the opposite of what your mother gave you. That's a view that will just cut you off. It's like cutting off your legs, as opposed to I can achieve my values in life with effort, and I enjoy the effort.
Sure.
They're my values.
You were listening today to Dr. Ellen Kenner. You can listen to her some more by listening to her radio show called The Rational Basis of Happiness. You can get in touch with that show by going to Dr. Kenner, KENNER.com. I'm sure you will find a lot of insight there. And listening to Dr. Kenner, you can tell she's very empathetic and understanding and dialed in to the human condition. And also her book, Selfish Path to Romance, that she co-authored with Dr. Locke. Dr. Kenner, thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the show. I know the audience, I enjoyed you. I know the audience enjoyed it as well. We learned something from you today, and we're grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful day, and good luck with your twin grandchildren. Your health is your wealth, and your health is the wealth of those that care about and love you.
Everyone's raving about the newest botanical superstar hitting the store shelves